Hello to everyone and welcome to the Nordic Football Podcast for 2023. It's been quite some time since we have last aired out to you all. I'm Steve Wiss and I am joined by Jonathan Faduba. It's been a few months off here, my friend. I know you've been a bit under the weather of late, but it's great to have you on board. How's things?
Hello. It's good to be back. Hi, everyone. And hello to you, Steve. Happy 2023. Yeah, I'm good. I've been a little bit unwell, to be honest. So you might feel it in my voice. Had to spend some time with the good old NHS as well. It got that bad. So yeah, not been an amazing period for me, a few weeks, but on the mend. And when Mr. Wiss offered me the chance to jump back on a pod to kick off 2023, I couldn't turn him down any longer. Couldn't hold it off. So this is the beginning of 2023 Nordic Football Podcast, locked and loaded and ready to go again. How have you been, my friend?
I've been well. We must apologise for the gap in between shows. I think we were always obviously not going to be around during the World Cup and into January. I don't think have we ever done a January podcast, Jonathan. It's kind of our holiday season, is it? But a little bit later than normal. I know there were a few rumours flying around about the end of the Nordic Football Podcast, but no, we are here to stay, and we are going to be delivering some great content again in 2023. So I mean, the thing is, it's a long gap. It's been a long gap in terms of waiting for the resumption of the leagues in Norway and Sweden as well. 5 months, which is probably the longest it's ever been, and hopefully the longest it ever will be. So I've been kind of it's like an itch I want to scratch, Jonathan, with the return of the league. Allsvenskan returns on the 1st of April. I've got to wait even longer in Norway. Easter Monday on, I think, the 10th or 12th of April for the resumption of that. But this has been an unusual long break, hasn't it? And I don't know whether you think that will suit some teams or others more.
Yeah, it's been an unusual long break, and that's obviously as part of the reason we've been away for so long. Hope you haven't switched off your feeds and subscriber feeds and things like that. If you have, then turn them back on, turn your notifications back on. But we've had a really long break. It's always the way, isn't it? And the World Cup obviously, facilitated that as well. The season ended slightly earlier, didn't it, in Sweden because of that. And so that's kind of led to this longer break. We have had a few, we've had a few interviews. Obviously, Steve, you put up an interview, but have been a bit quiet. I think the aim of this episode is just a recap. Basically, we're just going to look at the cups is the main thing at the moment that's been going on. Build up to pre-season, the new season with the Swedish Cup and also over in Norway. And then we're going to have a little transfer special. I think we're going to look at some juicy transfers from every single team in each league and just pick out one key transfer that's kind of caught our eye, just to give you an overview of the season to come. Of course, we have our season previews coming, potentially our 10 to watches, which are always very popular. So we're not going to give too many spoilers away, but we have we're going to look through every club and select some interesting transfers that have caught our eye the past few months. Steve, I think we do need to announce a couple of little things. Firstly, want to say a big shout out to Y Scout. We will be renewing our partnership with them in 2023. So that is great news. We'll be continuing to bring you cutting edge footage, obviously, and cutting edge insight and analysis from Y Scout's platform. And that's a massive thank you. And yeah, I think you were going to sort of give an intro here, but you could actually call me Mr. Sweden now part time, couldn't you?
I saw this announced actually on Twitter. Mr. Jonathan Faduba, a select columnist on. You'll have to tell us more about this because the pronunciation, I never get it right for this particular site, but a very prominent Swedish sports website that you are a big columnist on.
Yeah, so since we last spoke, obviously, I've started writing a column for Fotbollskanalen. They are pretty much one of the biggest Swedish football websites. A website that I've been on so many times in this past sort of 4 or 5 years. It's a really good resource. And yeah, I was approached to be a Premier League columnist. So if you've caught me on Twitter at JFFootball, FUTBOL, you might have seen some articles about the Premier League, just giving it from a Swedish point of view, if that makes sense, sort of a columnist, correspondent, if that makes sense, writing to the Swedish audience. It's an English language blog, so you can read it in English, but it is on the Allsvenskan Eliteserien channel. I think my last piece was on Michael Carrick, so it's a little bit, it's not Nordic related, but obviously the limelight from this podcast, Steve, has sort of raised a few eyebrows around the world and caught the attention of a few people. So yeah, it's really nice to be a part of Allsvenskan Eliteserien. It's been really fun writing columns and just kind of giving a bit of background and insight into the UK league. And I think it's nice to be on the pod to give the Swedish perspective, if you know what I mean. So it's nice to sort of change ends, if you know what I mean. Like 1 minute reporting from Sweden to England, and now England to Sweden as well via Allsvenskan Eliteserien. So yeah, that's been fun and a little side project. But yeah, what about yourself, my friend? I know you've got fingers in a few pies here and there.
Yeah, I've got, you know me, always fingers in several pies. I'm not just talking about the Weatherhead's pies in my local butchers at Pateley Bridge. Yeah, you know me. I mean, I kind of, I'm always like a worldwide football man these days, aren't I? You've got several vested interests out there. But, you know, predominantly, you know where my heart is, where my main leagues are. Those are in Scandinavia, in France, and, you know, obviously England as well. It's a stressful time being a Leeds fan. So we won't mention them too much on this podcast. Michael Carrick, that's a very interesting article you just recently done. I think he's done brilliantly at Middlesbrough, or Mikael Carrick, maybe he'd be called in Sweden, wouldn't he? But yeah.
The next piece I have coming does have a Swedish connection, because I'm going to be looking at some Championship players who could step up to the Premier League. So if you have an interest in that, no comment. But yeah, I think once I say a Swedish player, you can pretty much guess who it is.
I don't know why no one's bought him from Coventry, but maybe this article may enlighten us. So watch this space.
Let's get into the episode then.
Yes.
Did you want to start with Norway or Sweden? Up to you in terms of cups.
Well, I think the Swedish Cup is at the semi-final stage now, so I think we'll start with the Swedish Cup. And it's, you know, I always like the idea of Sweden doing the Cup at this stage of the season. I think it's a good way to get into the season. I wish Norway did this every year. From what I gather, there's actually going to be 2 cup finals in Norway for 2023. Would you believe, Jonathan? We're actually going to get a cup final in May, and we're going to get another cup final in November. So ridiculous. There's going to be 2 cup winners this season. But I like how Sweden do it. I know the group stages, some teams don't take it as seriously. But once you get to that quarterfinal spot, then you know, everyone's going for the trophy, aren't they? And there were 2 matches that went to penalties. We've got semi-finals to look forward to this coming weekend. Mjällby against Hammarby and Häcken against Djurgården. I don't know if anything's really stood out to you from this particular competition so far. Who are the defending champions of this? Can't remember. Malmo.
Yes, they beat Hammarby on penalties.
Yeah, I remember now.
Estrit Selmani, terrible miss. But yeah, in terms of the cup, I definitely agree. It's always an interesting sort of prelude to the season. I kind of have mixed feelings about it. It's almost in some ways used as a pre-season tournament, and I suppose it's a bit like the FA Cup, isn't it, in England, or the League Cup, where you can get tricked into playing maybe reserve teams or experimenting a little bit because it's, you know, the chance to maybe rotate, but at the same time, it offers a massive chance to, you know, get into Europe, doesn't it? If you're only a few games away from going all the way and basically bypassing a whole season's worth of effort if you really take it seriously. So I do think there's a massive, you know, merit in it if you take it seriously. And, you know, if you look in England, for example, Newcastle, they nearly got into Europe just via the back of that League Cup run because they took it so seriously. And you can look at the equivalent in Sweden. You know, we've got at the moment the semi-finals. I will talk about that. You know, who's in the semi-finals. We've got on the one side coming up later this week, we've got Mjällby with their new manager, who I know, Steve, you're very fond of. And we've had him on the show in the past. He has made it to the Swedish Cup semi-finals. They will play Hammarby for a place in the final. Hammarby beat AIK 2-1, and Mjällby knocked out Kalmar in the most recent round in the quarters. So those two will meet. for a place in the final. And on the other side of the draw, we've got champions Beck or Hacken, who will play Djurgården. Djurgården, probably the tie of the round. They knocked out Malmo on penalties after a 2-2 draw. That was a really exciting game. I think we posted a few clips on Twitter where you could see the atmosphere and, this new look Malmo side under Henrik Rydström. How's that going to be? Djurgården, they got a few big signings. What are they going to be like this season? So that was a nice, juicy sort of start to the season. And Hacken knocked out Norrköping 3-0. So in the other side of the draw. So yeah, we're getting towards that latter stages now. I mean, if you look at it for someone like Mjällby, I mean, if they get to the final, that's a massive chance to, put their name on the map in Europe potentially. It will be very difficult, of course, because Hammarby, Hacken and Djurgården will be the three favourites, of course. But you just never know, do you? You're only a couple of games away from European football there. So yeah, I think the biggest game for me, I think, was the Djurgården Hammarby game. That was a big one. But of course, the Hammarby AIK game as well was quite a big one in terms of Stockholm derby. Edvin Kurtulus and Yusuf Arabi scored the goals. Guidetti got one back for AIK. But yeah, generally speaking, those are the four teams to look out for. And I think we got some really exciting ties ahead of us. I don't think Mjällby will back down from Hammarby whatsoever.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the top three in Allsvenskan last season are all in this semi-final stage of the cup. So if Mjällby get knocked out, then Kalmar will be going into Europe, I do believe. Yeah, Kalmar will certainly be supporting Hammarby in this particular round. But this cup, it's really good that there's all four teams merit a lot of respect. Mjällby are very much underrated. They always have been. Indeed. Do you think these cup runs in Sweden can give teams a bit of momentum when they get to like the semi-final and final stage? Because the final is played usually around sort of 7 or 8 rounds into the season, isn't it?
Played in the season. And so that's the kind of dynamic that changes. Once you get to the latter stages, you've then got the season to contend with. And sometimes it's played kind of in a midweek. I've seen it played in a midweek before on like a Thursday afternoon. I think I remember many years ago, I think Östersunds, when they won the cup with Graham Potter, I think the game was on a random Thursday afternoon. I think people still going to work and stuff. So sometimes it's a bit of an afterthought. Sometimes I think maybe you could have a bigger final, if you know what I mean, maybe make more of a show of it, have a weekend. But it depends. And obviously the schedule plays a part in that. Like you said, I do think it's a massive opportunity for all these teams. Get some silverware on the board. And, if you look at, for example, Hammarby last season, it was a real blow for the club not to win it at that time. And, I think it was a bit of a blow to the season, really. So, yeah, I think it's a big tournament. It's still got a pre-season feel to it for me. It's hard to really massively get too excited at this stage of the campaign because you're still waiting for the real thing to get underway. But like I said, it's a nice prelude, gives you a little bit of a taster. There was a few upsets in the group stages, as you mentioned earlier, and that always comes. There's always a few teams. There's always a few teams that get knocked out early or go down to a small club, and that adds to the excitement of it.
Yeah, 18th of May is the final, so book your tickets over there, Jonathan, for that final. I was going to say one more thing before we go. Yeah, that's it. Who is going to win the Swedish Cup 2023? Put your neck on the line.
I think it's too early to make a prediction. I'm man likes to get on the fence to get me predicting.
I thought I would throw one out early for you here, just to remind you.
It's go easy on me, but no, of course you never will.
I think I might put my neck on the line actually for a winner here. And I like an underdog sometimes. And I do wonder if this could be a shock winner of this competition in Mjällby. I've got a feeling, this is a very well-run club, and it might be like the era for them to deliver some shock silverware.
Massive shout. I know you're a fan of the betting markets, and of course, I'm pretty sure that you'll get good odds for that. In terms of like historically, Hammarby, I mentioned earlier the disappointment last season. They've only ever won it once, for example. Malmo have won it 15 times. So I would put. I think if I had to, if you're making me stick my neck out, I would say Djurgården. One of the reasons, Steve, and actually it's a big bombshell coming out of Swedish football tonight, it looks as if Per-Mattis Hogmo is a candidate for the Midtjylland role in Denmark. Now, this is the man who won the title for Häcken for the first time in their history. And there's a lot of rumours that he's actually interested in the job. Now, it will be a massive blow to Häcken on the eve of the season. The man who's taken them into the Champions League, won the title for the first time in their history, very settled, exciting team. For it to happen so close to the season as well. I mean, it's rumours right now, but the sources that are kind of reporting it do seem to sort of suggest that he is got a little ear out on it. So, potentially a bigger league. Midtjylland's a big club with a nice model behind them and things like that. So, wow, that would be a massive blow to Häcken. That uncertainty might destabilise them. So, I'm not sure about Mjällby. So yeah, I think Djurgården look good. I think the fact that they knocked out Malmo gives them confidence. And yeah, I think if you had to push me, as of now, I'd say Djurgården would probably be my sort of favourite.
Whilst we're on the subject of Djurgården, I'm just going to give a few thoughts about the European adventures of the two teams from our regions here that made the knockout phases of the Conference League. And Buda Glimt, unfortunately, got knocked out by Lech Poznan of Poland, 1-0 overall over the two legs. I watched both. I actually thought there wasn't much between the two teams. I didn't really think much to Lech, if I'm being brutally honest. And I thought Glimt. This is the problem for teams. It's really hard for teams in Norway and Sweden and some other countries as well, because they are basically in the middle of their pre-season and they're having to go into knockout matches. And also the registration of UEFA is an absolute joke. It really is.
In what sense?
Well, because in the off season, there's so many new transfers that go into clubs. Say a club will typically bring in 6 or 7 new players and maybe lose 3 or 4. Do you know what I mean? Well, UEFA only lets you register 3 new players into your squad. Now, in Buda Glimt's case, they actually had to re-register Joel Mvuka, who went to Lorient on a transfer and was loaned back, but he's classed as a new player. So I think it's really. I actually think they need to look into this and maybe make some special dispensations for certain clubs in certain geographical areas, really. But rules are rules, I suppose. And now Lech are really enjoying facing the Scandinavian teams because they're 2-0 up over Djurgården in the Conference League. Can Diff respond in the second leg on Thursday in Stockholm, a 2-0 deficit? I don't know if they've been impacted by registration issues either, but they certainly, I know they've had the Swedish Cup and that, but it's not quite the same as it as domestic season. So it might be the end of the road, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think to be fair, I mean, if that's correct what you're saying, that is a bit of a anomaly, actually, isn't it? Really, because that's not really fair because the registration windows at a different time.
Yeah.
But in terms of the game itself, Diff played the strongest team possible available to them, really. As you mentioned, they had a few players out, but went down 2-0. It was interesting to see Philip Dargestad at Lech Poznan. Actually, he's a centre back who's been at Norrköping for a long time. He's moved on, obviously, and is playing now at Poznan on loan. So he will be returning to Sweden for that game. He had a solid game at the back there. Lech have also got Jesper Karlström, who is a former Djurgården player. He played in the game, so there is a bit of a Swedish connection to Lech Poznan. Also, Mikael Ishak up front. He played in the game as well as the captain. So, yeah, massive, basically Swedish connection in Lech Poznan's team. There's a lot of, I think, Polish scouts that look around Scandinavia. So, they've got the Swedish backbone, and looks like they might be able to get the job done. It'll be a tough game. I think Djurgården, the fans have been amazing in the European campaign so far, so they're going to be really, really up for it.
I hope they turn it. I don't honestly.
Sorry, with the atmosphere that they create and the fact that they've just beaten Malmo, they will have a bit of confidence, but it's a tough thing to go into 2-0 down.
I've been slagging off Lech Poznan on Twitter every single match that I've watched them play. I don't think they're very good at all, and I'll be continually going against them, Jonathan, in every match possible. So I think Diff have got a real chance if they do take their opportunities. Now we're going to have a little bit of fun here with some transfers, Jonathan. What's the plan here? We're going to talk about one transfer for each team in our leagues for a quick fire sort of a thing, either in or out. Obviously, when we do season previews, there's going to be a lot more in depth to this, but briefly now, each team, a significant transfer either in or out, which has to be mentioned.
Yeah, a bit of a game. We're going to call it, I guess, Scandinavian ins and outs. Now, I suppose the aim of it is, this episode, as we mentioned before, it's just a short introduction to who we are again. Don't forget. Of course, if you don't know who we are, then I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit more in later episodes. But, if you're new to the show, welcome. But of course, we like to sort of divide Norway and Sweden into different parts normally. But on this show, I think what we're going to do, just to keep the episode a bit more brief and a bit more maybe light, we're going to look at transfers. One sort of key transfer, Steve, that's what we're going to talk about in both nations for every single team. So what has caught your eye, pretty much, the question is, across the two regions during this transfer period? It could be a player in or it could be a player out. You can pick both, but obviously you'll have to keep it brief. What we're going to do is we're going to interchange. So we'll start with Sweden, the champions in Sweden, and then we'll move on to Norway, and we'll kind of maybe work our way down the table in different chunks. But hopefully it will prove informative for you and give you an overview of both countries and maybe some players to look out for and some players that you won't be hearing from. So, Steve, if I may, I'll take the lead. I'm going to start with obviously Häcken, the champions. We'll go through the table if you like.
Yeah.
That might be the best way of doing it. Obviously, we've got newly promoted sides. But I would say that ins and outs, the team that I'd say the player that maybe surprised me most or kind of the big signing maybe at the moment, I think is Simon Sandberg, who's joined from Hammarby on a free transfer. Now he can play as a kind of a right back. They haven't been hugely active actually, BK Häcken, to be honest, in the transfer market. I think Sandberg is kind of an established Allsvenskan player. He's been quite good for Hammarby, and it kind of suggests that they have a bit more of a budget, because I imagine he was on quite decent wage potentially in Stockholm. Häcken, not a huge club financially, but now Champions League football, they can start to maybe attract some of the big Stockholm players, if you know what I mean, some of the bigger players from that region. So I think that was an interesting transfer. I suppose the main one in terms of out, Steve, the loss of Alexander Yeremiev, the best striker in the league last season, pretty much. He's gone to Greece. He's left for a fee of around 300,000 euros. Sorry, not 300. That'd be a bargain. Given his market value is 2 million. He's gone to Panathinaikos. He's played a few games there as well, and is settling in. So massive loss for the league. Obviously, he did leave before for Germany and then came back. So we'll see how long he's there for. But those were the two that caught my eye. Over to you, Stephen. The champions of Norway, ins and outs. What's caught your eye?
Well, obviously for Molde, I'm going to have to mention the big signing of Veton Berisha from Hammarby for £3 million, which is a significant chunk of money. Everyone knows about Berisha as a proven striker in Norwegian football. Did all right in Sweden. Obviously funded by a big money departure of David Datro Fofana, my man, who I'll still find ways to talk about him on this show. We'll have to do like a David Datro Fofana watch, won't we, at Chelsea?
I'm still expecting him in your 10 to watch this season.
Well, I'm finding a way to get him in, undercover. But,
for those who don't know, Datro Fofana, who obviously made a massive shock move to Chelsea, really, isn't it, from our point of view? Yeah. Steve had him in his 10 to watch for the past 2 seasons. Controversially, never been done before. But obviously, hats off to you, Steve. Obviously, you recognised him 2 years ago. You stuck with him, backed him, despite, I've seen some of your comments about him over the years. Not exactly always nice.
He got me a Twitter ban for 24 hours. That man.
You've written him off at times. What? Banned from Twitter?
For 24 hours.
Well,
all a complete.
Why? What did you say?
I can't repeat what I said on here, can I? Obviously. No, it was just, I don't know. I think, you know what fans are like. They're quite protective over players, aren't they? But, £11 million. Good luck to him, indeed. And, over to you here for your Garten then, Jonathan. What's a big transfer that caught you out here?
Yeah, I think the big transfer from my point of view on this one is Oliver Berg. I think you have to mention him. It kind of caught my eye definitely in terms of a massive blow, I think, for Kalmar losing such a key player, pretty much their captain and their leader. Obviously, they've lost their manager as well. He's gone to Malmo. So we're going to probably see a new look Kalmar this season, and we'll talk about that in episodes to come. But I think that transfer, Oliver Berg, 29 years old, roughly 700,000 euros. He's going to add to the options. I don't think he's necessarily going to be an automatic starter, but I think he will sort of mold into the team. And he's got the ability. It's his time to step up at a massive club in the region, which I think he deserves. And so that is my sort of pick. I do have one other player that I want to mention, but I'm not going to do it now. You will have to listen to our 10 to watch for that. So there is one player definitely from Diff going to be in my 10 to watch. In terms of players out, the big one was Halmar Ekdal. He's gone to the championship. He's been signed by Vincent Company. So a player who knows a centre-back, obviously, having been a brilliant centre-back himself in his career. Burnley paid 2.8 million for him, euros. Now, he's a 24-year-old ball-playing centre-back. I've always liked him, always talked about him on this pod, actually, over the years. I've always said he's a classy kind of centre-back. I haven't really been following how he's done in Burnley since he joined. He's been there a while now, but played a few games. Obviously, similar to Armel Hodzic, who's at Sheffield United, similar move from Sweden to the championship. Doesn't happen that often, but Ekdal is a player of quite high quality. And those two ins and outs are my picks there. So let's move back to Norway, Steve.
Yeah, it's a Buda Glimt. And can I cheat here and actually just talk about a player who hasn't moved but was expected to move? And that is Hugo Vettelsen, who really everyone expected him to go in the January window. I think Glimt were offered potentially up to £5 million for him, 6 million. They rejected it, even though he only had 12 months left on his contract. He stayed, and I think he's extended his deal now. So I would say that's pretty significant player. In terms of an actual guy who has come into the club, the return of Frederick Andre Björkan from Hertha Berlin. It didn't work out there, and he's come back on a free transfer, which is great value.
You love breaking the rules, don't you? On this podcast,
you know me. You know me.
Just I'm just worried about your Twitter comments. Hopefully, it wasn't anything overly abusive. You're not going to get a call from the police anytime soon, anything like that.
This was a long time ago.
But yes, let's move on to Sweden.
Yeah, Hammarby.
Yeah, I think the one that's caught my eye here that I'd actually like to ask you about is it's for me it's a tie between. Well, I'm going to actually say three here, Steve. I'm going to cheat like you. Tesfaldet Teki is a player I've always liked. He's come back from Go Ahead Eagles. He's played he's been in the Netherlands, and I do like him as a player. So I'm really keen to see how he gets on at a big club in Sweden. Adi Nalic as well, I think is quite an interesting transfer. Really, he's left Malmo on a free, and I do think that Marty Spencer's might be able to get the best out of him. His career is kind of stalled a bit. 25 now. He was such a big young talent, never really quite hit the heights. He's had injuries. But the one I wanted to ask you about, Steve, is very briefly August Mikkelsen. He has been signed. He's the big main signing for 1.5 million. You've already mentioned Baricha, so I don't need to mention an out. If I was to mention another out, maybe I'd say Mohana Diaz. He's gone to DC United. I think he got an assist on his debut playing for Wayne Rooney. But August Mikkelsen, Steve, maybe a quick comment on him?
Yeah, I like him. Nice talent. Got a good engine on him. And for a small lad, he's actually quite strong. He sort of gets in your face a bit. So I think he's a really good signing. A sort of a Marty Cifuentes signing for sure.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And let's move on to Rosenborg, third last season in Norway. Who's caught your eye there in terms of ins and outs? They're always quite active, aren't they?
It's just, there's only one name I can mention here, and it's an out. And it is Kasper Tengstedt, who scored an unbelievable amount of goals for them last season. But his stay at Rosenborg has been very short. He was too good for them. Benfica snapped him up for £7 million. So yeah, a massively significant departure for Rosenborg. Yes, they've got good money for him, but a massive blow there. And they've also recently lost Stefano Vecchia to Malmo. Yeah,
and we'll talk about that again a later day. I think that's an interesting signing. It's only recently been completed, I believe, and quite a big fee. But yeah, I mean, that Tengstedt fee is insane, isn't it? That I don't often see that. He was destroying it though, wasn't he? So fair enough. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about him in the season preview in weeks to come.
Will. Mate, Kalmar then. We know the big out from Kalmar. Is there a certain player that's come in that's maybe caught your eye?
Yeah, well, I don't think they've been massively active, really.
Is there a Brazilian?
Well, they do actually have a player, I think, back on loan, or no, signed on loan, Maxwell. So there is one Brazilian, yes, as always. I think I'm going to pick Saku Latupa here. He's signed from GIF Sundsvall. He was in my 10 to watch last season. He's only 23. I think he had an okay season, but in a really bad Sundsvall team. I think this is a smart move for him and for the club. I think, this is maybe a nice platform for him to maybe be maybe a higher profile club, maybe that doesn't struggle so much. Obviously, we're yet to see how Kalmar are going to really play this season, still shaping up. But I think that he can maybe come in and replace Oliver Berg, and maybe he's a good technical player, formerly at AIK. I think he was at Ajax as a youngster, if I remember rightly. But I think he has still got potential at 23. So I'm going to go Ilatupa. I've already mentioned the out. That was Oliver Berg, so I don't need to talk about that. But let me switch back over to you, my friend. And I suppose the only other out maybe that I'd mention is Papa Diouf, but he's 33. He just came back on loan and he's gone to Italy, which is a bit of a weird one. So, he's been a big player for them in the past, but, not I don't think it's massively, they've not really, apart from Berg, they've not really massively lost anyone huge. Let's look at Lillestrøm, who finished 4th last season, Steve.
Yeah, I think for Lillestrøm, the signing I've got to mention coming in is Ruben Gabrielsen, the former Molde and Toulouse centre-back, big centre-back. And they've got him on a free, I think, or they haven't paid much, from Austin FC in the MLS. Now, the reason he's moved back is actually for personal reasons, which I'll discuss in another podcast. But this is a real coup, I think, for Lillestrøm, because Gabrielsen, he's I think at Eliteserien level, quite an elite centre-back, a really big leader, strong player. And I think it's a fantastic coup for Lillestrøm to have got a man of his stature into the team. Really strong centre-back who he comes across as a really nice guy as well, actually, but a player fundamentally I've always rated very, very highly.
Fantastic. Looking forward to further comments on that in weeks to come.
Yeah, and let's move to Sweden then for you. AIK.
Yes, always a big club, always very active in the transfer market. So you can't expect them to be out for too long. And I'm going to select, well, where do you actually start? Because they've signed a lot of players. But I think the player I'd like to select, just for now, is a bit of a maybe low-key one. He's signed on a free, but as a player I like. Abdusalam Magashi from Varnamo. Now, he's a big sort of barrel-chested Nigerian attacking midfielder. I really was impressed with him last season for Varnamo. One of my projects, Steve, that I mentioned over the past sort of few months, I did a bit of work for a team in Scotland, a bit of sort of just scouting work, just voluntary for a while. And did happen to recommend him. And I think he's a really good player. I think he would have sort of suited potentially that level of football. The reason that I pick him is I just want to see how he does at a big club. He had a lot of options. There are a lot of teams wanted to sign him. His contract was up. Varnamo were desperate to keep him, but they obviously couldn't hold on to him. The wages available at AIK are significantly higher than at Varnamo, that's for sure. The budgets are massively different. So yeah, he's the one I'm going to select. I'm interested to see how he gets on. He's 24. I think it's a big season for him. And in terms of the outs, I think Yassine Ayari is the one that you have to mention, really. He's gone to Brighton for 4 million, roughly £3 million, I think. He's a big signing. Brighton rarely get things wrong, do they? I liked Ayari. I think he had a lot of talent. I'm massively surprised to see him go to the Premier League. But one thing I know about Brighton is they do know a talent. So as a 19-year-old, I'm excited to see how he gets on. I will just briefly mention Joe Mendes and Stefanelli. Both of them have got quite big moves. I think Stefanelli's gone to Miami, which I think that's an interesting move to MLS. And Joe Mendes, an exciting right back, has gone to Braga for 1.5 million. So they have had quite a lot of outs to key players. Okay, but we'll talk about those two in weeks to come. But yeah, let's move over back to Norway. In this sort of back and forth, Steve, what are your thoughts on the team that finished 5th last season? And that is Odd.
Yeah, this is where I remind myself that Odd actually finished 5th last year, which I can't actually believe. Yeah, I'm going to try and crack on a bit here. We probably push on here maybe like half a minute or a minute for each one. Not too much to mention here, but I'm going to go with Leon Hien, the brother of Isaac Hien. He's coming from Hammarby. He hasn't actually played a game yet for Odd because he's been injured. So let's see how he does. But he's a 21-year-old former striker, now converted into a centre-back. So Leon Hien, if he's as good as his brother, bodes well, doesn't it? But I don't know anything about him.
That's fair enough, and that's part of the show, isn't it? Just giving players that you might keep an eye on for the season. So let's move back to Sweden.
Elfsborg.
Yes, indeed, Elfsborg. Always an interesting team. I think they always have some eye-catching signings, I would say, but they haven't been massively active. Actually, they've only bought one player, and that is Andre Bowman from Varberg Boys for an undisclosed fee. 21-year-old right midfielder. So really, not much to say. I think the departure that maybe caught the eye most is Leo Väisänen. He's gone for a big fee actually to Austin FC, MLS. MLS is starting to become a big market for Swedish players, by the way. A lot of, obviously, as I've already mentioned, 3 or 4 that have moved on. But yeah, that's quite a lot of money. Väisänen is a centre back who I think definitely deserves a move. It'd be interesting to know how he's been scouted by Austin. But obviously, it seems like MLS teams are becoming more active. I mentioned Stefanelli going to Miami, for example. GA's to go into DC United. So Väisänen is a Finnish centre-back, and he is the one I think they'll miss him. He will need replacing. We'll see what they'll do there. But yeah, those are the 2 for me.
And in Vålerenga is my next team to talk about. And the player I'm going to mention is just simply because of his name. You can tell it's a little bit of a light-hearted show. But they signed a player from Groad called Omar Bully Drama. I think it's a brilliant name. In fairness, I have heard some decent things about him.
Is he Gambian?
I think he is. I don't actually know his nationality.
That sounds Gambian.
But it's a great name, and I heard he is one to watch out for, potentially. But I've not really had a look at him yet. I've not done too much research. But Omar Bully Drama for Vålerenga. Great name.
Fair enough. Names will do. Names will do.
Yeah, so now Malmo, incredibly, they were 7th last year. We know they got a new manager.
Horror season for them. You've already mentioned, well, they've got a new manager, which we'll talk about. Obviously, Henrik Rydström, I've already mentioned, the most probably hottest managerial property in Swedish football last year after the work he did at Kalmar. I would say the player that's caught my eye is Taha Ali. He's a 24-year-old winger from Helsingborg, obviously big rivals Malmo and Helsingborg. So that would have pained Helsingborg fans, I think. Roughly 700,000 euros according to Transfermarkt. He's a exciting player, a really good 1v1 dribbling winger. I'm really keen to see what Rydström does with him, because he's if you can get the best out of him, I really think he's a player that could kick on. He's a little bit lithe, a little bit lightweight. If you were to put him in somewhere like France, I think he would struggle potentially physically. So I do think another year in Allsvenskan at a massive club is what he needs right now. So I think it's a great step for him. But obviously the pressure of a big club, let's see how he deals with that. Because like I said, in 1v1 situations, he's one of the best wingers in the league, potentially. So he's the one I'll select. The departure that I think I've already mentioned, obviously, Adi Nalic, Erdal Rakip has gone. He's gone to Turkey. He's kind of, it wasn't really unexpected. He's gone on a free, and Romain Gall has finally left Sweden. He's been left on a free transfer, despite featuring actually a few games in pre-season. Rydström did take a look at him, but he's left. So that's it for Malmo. I won't talk about Vecchia because we'll talk about him in future episodes. Of course, you've already mentioned him. So Taha Ali is the one to keep an eye on for me.
So on to Tromsø then in Eliteserien, and the big out would have been Mikkelsen. We've talked about him. An interesting player they've signed from Ranheim in the Obos. Sometimes there's some real gems in the Obos League again. Is a player called Vegard Erlien, who I actually mentioned him on a Twitter Spaces I did with Andy Martin this week, because he's listed as a midfielder in the Eliteserien fantasy game, but I actually think he's going to be playing up front. So he's effectively a striker. 14 goals last season for Ranheim. 25-year-old, seems like a good age to come up to Eliteserien level. And I think maybe he's that number 9 that Tromsø have been after for a long time. We'll have to wait and see. Vegard Erlien.
Good stuff. Over in Sweden, who shall I go for next, Steve?
Wait, it's EFK Göteborg.
Yeah, now there's a big develop. I think the biggest signing for EFK Göteborg actually. I'm going to go for a bit of a left field choice here, Steve.
Yes.
They've signed they've signed someone to their fan base by the name of Steve Wyss.
You got me there. You got me there. That's a good one, mate. That.
Now we've been talking, and I think I've seen a gleam in your eye whenever their names come up. So that is going to be my left field shout. I've seen a tear in your eye when the EFK pre-match anthem comes on. You've talked about them a lot recently in glowing tones. I just got a sneaky feeling that could be a key signing for them this season. The backing of Wyss, could be crucial.
Do you know what? I will hang my hat that I do have a soft spot for them. There's no doubt about it that I do like the fan base. I do love the anthems that they've got, and I might just be more strongly on board for this particular season. But it doesn't mean me being on board means that there'll be a soft touch, because it often means that my critical tongue will be in operation even more. But yeah, a key addition for them.
Well, you are known for every now and then an outburst. But for those who don't, you might be new to the podcast. Obviously, Steve can be prone to an outburst here and there, but he means it all well. But I think there is a bit of a soft spot there, so potentially a key signing for them from that point of view. Being realistic on the pitch, I'll mention Elias Haugen from Buda Glimt, but we'll talk about him, I think, in a future episode. And in terms of departures, there's been a few. I think Werner Hahn, he was always going to leave the keeper, but I thought he was a really good keeper for them, to be honest. He's gone to Japan. I think it's a shame how his career ended there. I thought he looked like a really solid keeper. And Hossein Aish has gone to South Korea. Bit of a loss. He's a Palestinian winger. He's a good player, actually, and hit and miss. But I think that's a bit of a loss for them potentially. So that's what I'll pick. But Wyss potentially signing of the season.
Love it. Absolutely love it, mate. Absolutely love that one. We'll move to Sarpsborg, and a signing that's caught my eye, a recent signing actually in the last week or two. Someone called Ramon Pascal Lundqvist from Groningen for £150,000. Several Eredivisie appearances, midfielder. And I think looking at his past pedigree there, that should serve him very well going into Eliteserien. So, always a bit of a tricky side, Sarpsborg. And they'll be difficult in the season preview, no doubt about it, with loads of injuries. But yeah, Ramon Pascal Lundqvist, interesting addition for them. And your next team to talk about is Mjällby.
Yeah, it is indeed. The player I want to just sort of highlight is an interesting one. He's from your region, Steve, Colin Rosler. The son, I believe, of Uwe Rosler, the Manchester City player and former manager, obviously, of Malmö. He's come in as a centre-back. He's going to replace the outgoing Carlos Moros Gracia, who's gone to Djurgården. He was one of the best centre-backs in the league last season, Gracia. And I think that is a bit of a loss, but Rosler potentially could be an interesting one. I'm not going to get your thoughts on him now. We'll talk about him in future episodes, but that is probably the player that maybe caught my eye. The other one, just want to briefly mention, Steve, Imam Yanyi. Talked about him. He was in my 10 to watch, I believe, or a player to watch. Can't remember. Many years ago, before he moved to Everton from Beko Häcken's academy. He's 19 now. Not worked out for him at Everton, and he has come back to Sweden and joined Mjällby. Good player in my opinion, and I'm keen to see how he gets on. In terms of players leaving, now this one for me is a massive one. Literally, Steve, Jacob Bergstrom. He's gone to Djurgården. Now, I'm interested to see how he sort of competes with the other strikers they got there, like Advanced. Now, Bergstrom, for anyone who can't remember or hasn't listened to this show before, he's the only man I've ever seen smash into a crossbar and the crossbar came off worse. The guy is an absolute tank. I've always quite liked him from that point of view. He's strong as an ox. He's decent in the air. He's brave. He's not technically amazing, but I think this could be an interesting move to Djurgården. I think they've maybe picked up on that. A bit of a character, similar to Advanced. So I think they'll be interested to see how those two sort of compete and dovetail. Similar sort of profiles. But yeah, that I think how he does is something I'm interested to keep an eye on. I think, like I said, Gracia is a big loss. But the one I'll say in terms of ins is Colin Rosler.
Yeah, my next team to talk about is Arlesund, but do I have to mention anyone here? because nothing really stands out to me. They've obviously signed players and they've got rid of a few as well, but it's just nothing.
You can just name one outgoing if you want. It doesn't have to be both.
I think I'll know an ingoing. It's got to be Amadou Mido Diop from Christiansund, who for several years done a good job at Christiansund. They've nabbed him on a free, decent Eliteserien experience, so I quite like him. But yeah, I think you can almost tell straight away that Allsvenskan are going to be kind of a team that I'm not going to be mentioning an awful lot on NFP this year. Potentially, things can change, but at the minute they don't excite me too much.
Yeah, I mean it's still early days as well, isn't there? You know,
of course,
this is just a bit of a lighthearted.
Of course,
look through some of the teams. Yeah. So it's not
Varnamo.
It's not a massive insult. It's not an insult to Arlesson, but for me, Varnamo, obviously with their really small budget, they've got to be really clever in who they recruit. A massive problem for them has been the loss of Antonsson and Magashi, who I mentioned, on free transfers. Now, Antonsson was one of the top scorers in the league. I think he was second top scorer. He was brilliant last season up front, and he's gone to Saudi Arabia, potentially maybe on a lucrative deal. I'm sure he'll be earning a lot more than he was at Varnamo, that's for sure, with the smallest budget. We spoke to their assistant manager last season. So you can look back through the archives if you want to listen to the budget situation at Varnamo last year, their first ever year in Allsvenskan. I suppose the one I'll point out, just from an interesting point of view, geographically, Marco Bustos, a winger from Pacific FC in Canada. Varnamo have a bit of an interesting scouting system. I think they do have a sporting director who's quite forward thinking. And so we'll see how they adapt to their second season and how the transfers go. But he's the one that I'll look at for now. And yeah, Antonsson is a massive loss, and I think Magashi is too. But let's move back to Norway, yeah.
Yeah, Haugesund, and it has to be a departure here. Christoph Zafiris, 2.6 million, sailed to Slavia Prague. Always got to make sure I get my Pragues right on this show, haven't I, Jonathan? 2,539 minutes he played last season, 4 assists, 5 goals. Probably a player we didn't talk about enough on the show last season. He was really close to making my 10 to watch. I wish I put him in now because he had a great campaign. I think he at times single-handedly led them really in midfield, and he's going to be a massive, massive loss for Haugesund, who I'm a little bit worried about at this point in time.
Yeah, they obviously had a middling season last year, and we'll see how they get on in Sweden. We'll move to Sirius. Again, the team who's not been massively active, I wouldn't say. A few loans and a couple of signings. I think Andre Alsanati is one who I remember watching when I was in Sweden, when I used to live there. He was a young talent, I believe. I think he was at Hammarby. I saw him in a youth tournament, I think when he was about 17. Roughly, and I did like him, and I thought he could have a career. He's the one that I'd probably point out for now. I don't know how he'll get on there, but I just I just remember him from that tournament, to be honest. So he's the one I'm going to pick. And in terms of outs, I guess Yuya Sugita from Sirius. He didn't have an amazing season last year, but I still think it's a bit of a loss to the league. I think technically he's a good player, and him and Vecchia at one point a couple of years ago, they were such a good partnership. But yeah, he's kind of petered out a little bit and left the league, so that'll be the one I'd select.
Yeah, on to Viking. I'm going to talk about 2 additions here, 2 strikers they've signed: Nick D'Agostino from Melbourne Victory and Lars Jørgen Salvesen from Bodø Glimt. They've spent a combined 1.5 million on both of these strikers. Initially, it looked like they were just happy to bring in D'Agostino, but I think a bit of fan criticism, a bit of media pressure has meant they brought Salvesen in as well. And at the minute, there's only one spot for these strikers in their formation, though. So who's going to fit in? Are they going to adapt so they go 2 up front? Because I read actually D'Agostino said he's not frightened by Salvesen's arrival and that he deserved to start against Rosenborg in the Cup. He did start, but Salvesen came off the bench and scored after 6 minutes. So interesting battle here between them. 2 new additions up front for Viking.
Yeah, and over to Sweden, we've got Norrköping. I'm going to pick a player who we've actually had on this podcast, Steve. During the days of Mr. Henry and Danish Dynamite, the new podcast that he has. So he had an interview with Vito Hammershøi Mistrati, who at the time was at Randers. You can go through the archives and listen to it. Great interview from Henry. Talked a really wide-ranging interview, and I quite enjoyed it. He's actually been signed by Norrköping. He's come from Cluj. So he's had quite a few transfers, I guess, since we interviewed him, because he's gone from Randers, I guess, to Cluj, and then obviously now to Norrköping. They signed him for about 300,000. Obviously, Norrköping had a terrible season last year, really disappointed on many fronts. They would have been disappointed with their cup as well exit recently. And in terms of the ones that have left, I think I would pick Jonathan Levi has gone to Hungary for quite a big fee. He's always been quite a good player, always puts up good numbers, goals and assists, attacking midfielder. So he's a bit of a loss for Norrköping, and they'll need to replace him. And maybe Hammershøi Mistrati, a special guest, could maybe step in.
Yeah, onto Norway. Strøm's Godset. They've got a new manager who has come in from K from Oslo, and he signed one of his former players in defence, Fredrik Christensen Dahl. Centre back, we can also play left back. He can play on the left-hand side of a three-man centre back formation, which is important. And I think this guy might be one of those players that steps up well from the Obosla again. I really do. Feels like the right sort of age. 24 on the board. Fredrik Christensen Dahl. From K from Oslo to Godset. I'm not actually sure if there was a fee involved for this player. I'll have to look into a bit more detail. But from what I've heard, this guy could be a good one to watch on.
Yeah, mine, I'm going to be very brief now. Steve will run through a few of them. Degerfors, they haven't really been massively active, in my opinion. So I still think there's a bit of work to be done. There are a few rumours of players coming in, but I think I'll just go for Bassi from Ferencváros. Let's see how he gets on. Haven't really, I'll be honest, I haven't paid a massive amount of attention to Degerfors in pre-season. So I know I must do better here, but that signing from abroad.
What's his first name?
It could be an interesting one. His name is Fortune Bassi. He's a striker, and he could be interesting. The big exit, Stephen, it's not necessarily, I don't think it's necessarily going to massively damage them, but I just think there's a weird link to Cork City. Daniel Kresic moved on to Cork City in Ireland, and they've actually bought quite a few players from Scandinavia, Cork City. I know they've had a takeover recently, and I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but if you look through their squad, they've got a few Scandinavian players. I think one or two Swedish players. I think Albin Wimbo as well, potentially. I can't remember now off the top of my head. But I guess there's some scouting going on from Cork City in Ireland. So that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. But yeah, that's it for now for Degerfors. Over to you.
Yeah, HamKam. I'm going with the new goalkeeper. They've got Marcus Sandberg from Stabæk. He was the goalkeeper of the year in Obos last year. Pretty good addition, in my personal opinion. They've got him on a free. We know there was a bit of a goalkeeping merry-go-round at HamKam back end of last season. And I just wonder whether it wasn't a position I actually thought they were going to look into this particular season. But now they've got an undisputable number one in Sandberg in between the sticks. And I think it's a really good he will definitely prevent goals. He will help them overachieve in terms of XGA numbers. So Marcus Sandberg, HamKam.
Shout out to Tom Dent, their assistant manager, who was the guest on the most recent show we had. I'll move on to Varberg Boys. Steve, always very active in the transfer market, always sign sort of players that are a bit left field. I'm just going to go for Alham Lawi from Helsingborg. I think at times last season he looked like he had some ability about him. Obviously they've been relegated. He signed on a free transfer. I think there is a little bit of ability there. He can get goals, and I'm interested to see how he sort of steps up at a different club. So that's going to be my choice for ins. And for outs, obviously, I think Robin Simovic is a bit of a blow. He's gone to Geonam Dragons, and then the wonderfully named Des Kunst. He's left as well, and then obviously, like I mentioned, Wimbo has left to Cork City on a undisclosed fee. So yes, Cork City definitely scouting in Sweden in lower tiers. Those are my picks.
Right, so Sandefjord, I think this is the last one because we are going to leave the promoted teams for a bit of a bonus in the future. But Mohamed Ofkir has left them a big loss. He was brilliant last year, but they've kind of reinforced an attack with a player from Egersund in the third tier of Norwegian football called Jacob Dunsby, who has been performing very well in pre-season, including a recent 4-1 Norwegian Cup win against Odd. So Jacob Dunsby is definitely a player that's catching my eye for them, for Sandefjord, coming in into the season.
Yeah, you're going to do promoted teams next time. I'm happy to do them now.
We can get on with yours then, yeah.
Bromma are newly promoted. They've signed some interesting players, actually. I've always liked Kevin Ackerman. He had heart problems, but when he was at Hacken as a youngster, he was really, really talented when I was in Gothenburg. Heart problems stopped his career, moved to Fiorentina, came back, and that's, if he's going to be in Allsvenskan, I'm really keen to see how he gets on and if he plays. Simon Kroon as well from Halmstad, I really like him. I liked him a few seasons ago. I've actually met him. He's a nice guy as well. And in terms of outs, I think the two that they're going to be huge blows. They're going to be in my 10 to watch, so I'm not even going to name them. Not even going to name.
I will actually go on.
For Halmstad, I'll just quickly go through Halmstad, shall I?
Yeah.
I think Nasiru Mohammed, if I'm right in saying. No, sorry, Naeem Mohammed from Ghanaian has joined from a Danish team, I believe. He's a centre forward, so we'll see how he gets on. Like I say, Halmstad, I haven't massively paid attention to them, actually. But he's the one that I suppose has sort of caught my eye in terms of an in.
I'll give you one in, actually, for Stabæk, because Brann have hardly had any ins and outs at all. But Stabæk have got a very interesting goalkeeper right now on a free from Toulouse, former Allsvenskan goalkeeper of the season, Isak Pettersson at Stabæk. I mean, it's a really good goalkeeper addition. So there's a few keepers catching my eye in Eliteserien.
Well, you do love a goalkeeper. Anyone who's new to the show will
very excited by that. Very excited by that one.
And just in terms of Halmstad outs, obviously Simon Kroon, like I said, he's gone to Bromma Poikin. So there's a bit of a, not a sideways move, but they've both newly promoted. So it's interesting to see that move. I think he's moved back to Stockholm potentially with Bromma Poikin, but that's a bit of a blow, I think, for Halmstad. So I think that pretty much wraps it up, and we're just about under an hour.
Yeah, we're just about done. Good to be back, Jonathan, and we'll do more episodes coming up soon in the next few weeks. As ahead of the season, obviously watch out for our renowned in-depth season previews. The first one will be for Allsvenskan because it's starting 10 days earlier, and then into Eliteserien. So there'll be plenty of a lot of in-depth talk about all the teams, fantasy advice for both leagues up there, and it's getting very close now, Jonathan.
Yeah, you've been on a few Twitter spaces, haven't you? I've seen you on your space. Very interesting stuff with fantasy. Yeah, we will talk about that next time. We'll renew the leagues as well if you've been in the leagues. We'll renew the Patreon as well. We'll talk about the Patreon and our plans for it this season. But I think that'll be it for this week.
We'll do. Yeah, do remember to follow us on Twitter at Nordic Foot Pod, where that account will be a bit more active again soon. At Meatman Soccer for me, and at JF Football for yourself, Jonathan. But take care, everyone. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again very soon. Goodbye.